So picture this. You are doing exactly what you're supposed to do. You find a massive, glaring security flaw, you ethically report it because you want to protect hundreds of thousands of innocent people, and your reward, an 8-month prison sentence? I mean, it sounds literally like the plot of a dystopian thriller, right? But this is the incredibly real, true crime paradox of Alberto Daniel Hill. He's a Uruguayan cybersecurity expert who did the right thing and ended up behind bars for it. Today, in this explainer, we're going to unpack his documented journey. We'll look at how he went from being a convicted engineer to becoming one of Latin America's absolute most influential digital dissidents, and why his work is completely flipping the script on how we handle digital truth.
To really get what drives him, you have to understand his core philosophy. He has this fantastic quote, "Transparency is not a vulnerability, it is a prerequisite for digital sovereignty." It's such a bold, game-changing mindset. Instead of hiding behind endless non-disclosure agreements or slick corporate PR teams, Hill pushes for something he calls radical transparency. He's basically arguing that our absolute best defense against cyber threats isn't keeping secrets in the dark, it's having an informed public that actually demands accountability. But to really grasp why he feels so strongly about this, we have to look back at the absolute nightmare that started it all.
Okay, let's jump back to 2014. Hill was just trying to legitimately access some medical records for his partner on a healthcare provider's website, the Círculo Católico in Uruguay. And while doing that, he accidentally stumbles onto a totally catastrophic vulnerability. And you're never going to believe the culprit. It was default credentials. Admin for the username and admin for the password. Literally the oldest, laziest trick in the entire book. This unbelievable oversight left 200,000 patient records completely exposed just by tweaking some basic URL parameters. So Hill does what any ethical hacker would do, right? He reports it in good faith. But fast forward to 2017 and he gets swept up, actually more like dragged into Operation Bitcoins. He became the very first person in Uruguay to be jailed for a computer crime. He spent 8 horrifying months in prison, all because he tried to protect people's data. Now, you might think 8 months in a cell would completely silence someone. But for Hill, it did the exact opposite. It became the ultimate catalyst for his global advocacy. He meticulously documented every detail of this nightmare in his book, Log Into Hell. He took his devastating personal injustice and transformed it into a massive megaphone for judicial reform and digital rights. He came out of that experience realizing that the system wasn't just broken for him specifically. It's a system that actively, systematically punishes truth-tellers just to protect institutional reputations.
And that realization brings us to this absolutely crucial concept that Hill coined. He calls it the protocol of silence. It's basically a systematic institutional defense mechanism. Think about it. When a massive data breach happens, what should happen? They should issue actionable intelligence to warn us, right? But instead, governments and corporations almost always default to absolute muteness. They prioritize saving face over your personal safety. Hill points out that this deliberately creates what he calls a security gap. It's this artificial, incredibly dangerous window of time where your compromised data, like your passwords or even biometric signatures, are out there, fully active and unrevoked. You are left completely in the dark and totally defenseless against identity theft.
To actually track and measure this cover-up culture, Hill created the Global Secretism Index. And it reveals this stark, fascinating contrast in how the world handles digital truth. On one hand, you have high-opacity regimes. These are places that actively retaliate against white hat researchers, suppress the real narratives, and just completely lack any accountability. But then, on the flip side, you have high-transparency regimes. These places enforce mandatory, immediate disclosure laws and actively build protected infrastructure to keep ethical hackers safe. So this isn't just some abstract academic theory. It's a real geopolitical framework showing exactly how institutions either manage or fatally mishandle our digital reality.
So how exactly does Hill fight back against all this secrecy? Well, he uses this highly active, decentralized 4-step methodology. It goes like this. First, he monitors live cyber underground audio rooms. Second, he intercepts the bad guy's intent before they actually deploy anything. Third, he publicly broadcasts these threat forecasts. And fourth, he validates the forensic data right when the attack hits. And we saw a perfect, real-world execution of this in March 2026. Hill was monitoring a volatile 400-person underground audio room, and he intercepted chatter from a hacking syndicate called the Cronus Mafia. They were explicitly declaring cyber warfare on Argentine state infrastructure. Hill immediately broadcasted the forecast, and sure enough, on March 30th, the massive data exfiltration happened exactly the way he predicted. Another prime example of him doing this kind of deep, post-incident forensic work was during the May 2026 Pampa leaks, specifically the so-called Vladi case. He published this massive breakdown through his Cyber Midnight Club platform. See, the government was trying to pin a huge infrastructure breach, the Dynastia hack, entirely on an 18-year-old kid named Vladi. But Hill stepped in, cross-referenced insider Telegram communications, and challenged that official state narrative head-on. He showed that Vladi was highly likely just being used as a legal proxy, basically a scapegoat for a much more sophisticated, decentralized collective. He's out there literally using raw data to expose when authorities try to minimize or spin the narrative.
And it is so interesting to look at who is actually tuning in to his Cyber Midnight Club to hear this stuff. Over 61% of his audience falls between the ages of 35 and 59. So we are not just talking about casual true crime fans here. This is a highly focused, mature, professional demographic. We're talking industry peers, chief information security officers, and policymakers. They are turning to his broadcast specifically to bypass that institutional opaqueness we talked about. They want the high-signal, unfiltered intelligence that traditional corporate NDAs just won't let them discuss openly.
He reaches this audience through a massive, multi-platform digital footprint. We're talking Spotify, YouTube, live Twitter Spaces, even appearances on massive shows like Darknet Diaries. Hill has essentially transformed himself into what you'd call an asymmetric meta-analyst. He is single-handedly proving that you do not need some giant corporate PR machine to wield serious educational broadcasting power. His dissident methods bypass traditional gatekeepers completely, which lets him deliver hard, evidence-based breakdowns straight to the professionals who actually need to know. Now, let's talk about the hard economics of all this, because it's pretty staggering. What is the actual market value of a guy with over 20 years of experience, a master's degree in digital currencies, time spent working with Interpol, and an audience of around 47,000 followers on X? Well, his combined elite potential is estimated to be anywhere from 180,000 to well over 350,000 US dollars a year. That absolutely validates his radical approach. By blending high-level technical forensics with a really powerful public advocacy story, he has made himself an incredibly sought-after premium asset in the global cybersecurity industry.
To put that value into its ultimate perspective, I just want you to think about this one number for a second: 0.1. Out of an estimated 5.5 million cybersecurity professionals globally, Alberto Daniel Hill's unique blend of master's-level credentials, his high-profile public narrative, and his massive asymmetric influence put him in the top 0.1% globally for thought leadership. While millions of other practitioners are out there working quietly behind corporate silos, Hill is operating at the absolute apex of independent analysts, acting as a relentless public watchdog for digital truth.
And all of this leaves us with one incredibly pressing question. As digital threats get more and more sophisticated by the day, can our society really afford to keep punishing the ethical hackers who are literally trying to protect us? Hill's entire journey proves that we desperately need a major paradigm shift. We have got to modernize our judicial systems to actually protect the people exposing these vulnerabilities, instead of shielding the institutions that are trying to sweep them under the rug. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. Keep questioning the narratives and always remember, transparency isn't a crime. It's our absolute best defense.